You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 48.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Jonathan Albon is regarded as the best obstacle course racer in the world. Jonathan has won countless OCR races both in the US and Europe. Most notably, Jonathan is the three-time OCR World Champion in 2014, 2015 and 2016. He's the winner of the Sky Racing Extreme World Series in 2016, the World's Toughest Mudder Team Champion in 2015, and the Spartan Race World Champion in 2014. In this episode, Jonathan gives an insight into one of the fastest growing sports in the world and what it takes to become a multiple-time world champion. Enjoy the interview. John Albon, welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Now, you are a multiple-time obstacle course world champion. It was funny, I was actually looking on your website, jonathanalbon.com, under the events section. And, you know, like on a computer, if you do like Control F to find something, as of sort of today, I typed in like first, and there were 65 matches of you coming up, like, you know, since sort of today through to when you started, like a number of years ago. There were 65 instances of you coming first. That's quite incredible.
Yeah, I guess I had quite a good run.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about doing that myself. But yeah, I guess once you tally them all up, it's quite impressive.
Like obstacle course racing's fairly new. Like it's a fairly new sport, and it's been around for, you know, the last number of years. How did you actually get into it?
So, I mean, when I was younger, I played skate hockey, like roll hockey, ice hockey on wheels. And then I quit when I was about 20 and just needed to keep fit. So I sort of like started running a little bit. But then I saw in the newspaper that there was this challenge called Tough Guy, where not only you had to run sort of a cross-country course, you had to jump over things, swim, crawl, might get electrocuted, and it's in the winter, so it's really cold as well. So it's like a real challenge to see if you could finish. So I thought, I want to test myself and see if I can finish it. And I went along and actually managed to finish it. And from then on, I was kind of like hooked. So I entered into another one and another one and another one, and just kept on going.
What was it? The Tough Guy?
Yeah.
Was that the original sort of OCR style event?
Yeah. So it's been going for something like nearly 30 years or something now. It is the classic event. It's sort of like where it all began. All right. The vision was that they were going to sort of test the human being and sort of like push them to their limits, and then but do it in a controlled, nice, safe environment. Yeah. And then it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago that this sort of like concept really was found out and was taken globally.
So prior to that, like as you were sort of growing up, were you sort of fairly active in your own right? Were you sort of into other sports, or were you much of a runner sort of, you know, in the early years?
Yeah, I was active. I wouldn't call myself a runner. I mean, I always knew I could run. Like I ran a bit of like cross country in school sort of thing, like the odd sort of like PE class, just running a bit of cross country. But apart from that, my main sport was, as I said, skate hockey, where I was a member of a team. I played at regional level, and I played for Great Britain one time as well. So that's a fairly small sport as well, but it was still a lot of fun, and really enjoyed it, and obviously kept me in good shape.
Yeah. So what's the appeal of obstacle course racing? Like I was mentioning to you sort of off air, like I've never done an event. It's something that I wouldn't mind doing. To me, it just looks like a world of pain.
I guess it's very different. All the events are different, and a lot of them are sort of like tailored to different groups of people. One of the main things for me is I really like the fitness you have to have in order to do well or to complete one of the races, which is like a very all-round fitness. Not only do you have to be able to run, you also have to be relatively strong to either carry things or like move your own body weight and have quite a lot of technique, and also be very mentally strong as well, because you can get into pretty nasty situations in races when it's cold or whatnot, and you have to sort of really push through. So yeah. I really liked that idea of not being a really specific athlete, not just being able to run or not just being able to pick heavy things up. You have to really be sort of very all round.
With your training, can you give us like a high level overview of your training? Do you sort of specifically focus on certain strength exercises or cardio? How do you sort of approach your training for a particular event?
Well, my training really does actually vary from like season to season, because living in Norway, I mean, when it's winter and it's snowy, I can go out skiing. And then in the summer, I'll sort of like cycle more in the nicer weather. But the main things for obstacle course racing is to be a good runner. So running is that's what I enjoy most as well. So that's sort of what I train predominantly. And then to go bouldering and work on your grip strength and sort of like your overall body strength, but not sort of like making yourself too heavy. So to go bouldering is absolutely perfect, and it's a really fun activity in itself. And then also just sort of standard strength training that you do down in the gym or outside in like a boot camp type class, which will not only improve your strength, but also your running speed.
And what is bouldering?
So bouldering is pretty much, it's like climbing mostly. I mean, a lot of people do it indoors. You can do it outdoors as well, which I guess where it started. Yeah. But it's climbing without a rope. So you only go up to about 3 or 4 meters. So you don't need much technical ability to do it. You can just go down with a group of friends, take like an easy sort of like 5-10 minute course just to sort of understand the safety aspects of it. And then off you go, and you just climb up to 3 meters, then climb back down again, and that's it.
Yeah, that would really work your forearms and your grip and your lats as well.
Yeah, exactly. And unlike traditional climbing, I guess it's a sort of a lot. You only go up to 3 or 4 meters, so it's a lot more explosive and it's a lot harder, but a lot shorter. So it's not like you have to wait a long time to get on the wall and sort of climb for like 4 or 5 minutes. You sort of like can really hit sort of routes very quickly.
Do you do sort of any other? Like you mentioned, skiing. Do you do much skiing in the winter in Norway?
Yeah, I always used to ski, but mostly alpine. And then moving to Norway, I was exposed to cross-country skiing, which is it's really good for you as well. Yeah. So it's like a really good cardio workout and strength workout in one. It's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I've never done any sort of long-distance cardio activity like in the snow. I think that'd be quite good. Like, I've never experienced it, but, you know, the really freezing cold air on your lungs over an extended period of time, I reckon that'd be pretty good.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you've got classic cross-country skiing, skate cross-country skiing, and I also love to go and do type activities as well, take snowshoes down, just sort of like pick a mountain and go up there and come back down again. So there's really, there's loads of different activities you can do, and it's just sort of like a whole other dimension to training.
Do you do sort of any other stuff like in the gym at all, like specific, you know, like circuit training or?
I try to do some circuit training. I think it sort of keeps me as sort of an all-round athlete. I do go to the gym on occasion, but I would rather do most of my training out in the nature. But then I do most of my running outside, so to go to the gym isn't that bad, and I enjoy circuit training. It's not sort of my absolute passion. I enjoy the running side more, but I can see that it's useful and it keeps me all round.
With training, do you sort of focus, like if you could sort of divide up the total training time spent with around strength versus the total training spent with developing your speed, is it like a 50-50 split, or would you sort of do more sort of speed, you know, more of an emphasis in your training on sort of developing speed and cardio over the strength side of things?
I think definitely the running side of things takes it's a lot more than the strength side of things. But a lot of that running is done in a slower pace, and a lot of it can be done running in snow and up mountains as well. So I would have thought when it comes to actually running, probably only 10 to 15% of that running is actually the speed work, and the majority other is just sort of base miles, going out enjoying myself in the mountains.
Yeah. Do you sort of focus with the running side of things? Do you focus on trying to get like a lot of vertical gain, in your sort of weekly running training? Do you sort of focus on that?
I've actually focusing on that. Being in Bergen, there's some really good runners here, and I sort of like learnt from how they train. And I know one in particular, he really concentrates on how much gain, just because the mountains here aren't amazingly big. And if you concentrate on just going up and down them, you won't really get that much gain in. Yep. Whereas if you concentrate on your gain, you might go up and down it 2 or 3 times and not even think about it, because you're concentrating on this other thing. So I've actually been doing that for the last couple of weeks, and that's something I'm going to be doing through and into the summer, when I'll start cutting back a little bit on that and concentrating more on the speed for when all the racing starts.
Now, just for listeners, you're a multiple-time world champion. You're the OCR World Champion, 3-time defending, so 2014, 2015, 2016. When's the 2017 one? Is that sort of, what month is that in?
That's in October.
Yep.
And it's going to be held in Canada again this year.
Yep. You're also the winner of the Sky Racing Extreme World Series in 2016, the World's Toughest Mudder Team Champion 2015, and the Spartan Race World Champion in 2014. So you're a multiple-time world champion. How does it feel when you sort of wake up in the morning knowing you've got a big target on your back? You're the top dog, or you're right up there. Do you sort of ever really think about that at all?
Not really, actually, to be honest. I think I really enjoy training, and I'd hopefully be going out and doing this training whether I was winning all the races or not. I just wake up and think about what I want to do and go out and do it. I mean, I can only push myself as hard as possible in these races, and if that's enough to win, then it's enough to win, and in the future, if it's not enough to win, it won't be. So I'm not too worried. Is
there a particular event that can you maybe tell us your very first one?
So my first being tough guy, it was actually, that is quite a memory. So if I had to pick sort of like one of the most memorable events that I've done, it would have been that one, I would have thought. Yeah.
Because that's sort of done normally in winter, isn't it?
Yeah, it's normally held on the last weekend of January, so around the 30th or 31st of January. And there's ice on the water in several places. You have to sort of dunk your head right underwater and swim under some logs and things. You have to jump off a high plank into the water. There's hundreds of obstacles you have to do, a lot of them involving water. And that is really cold. I mean, when I did it that first year, there was ice on top of the water. It was probably about a centimetre thick. All right. So I wasn't the first one to run through it, but then the ones that had broken it up. So then when you are running through water that's, say, shin deep, and it's got floating chunks of ice on, all it's doing is hitting into your shin, which is probably even worse, I would have thought. So I finished that race, but I was in quite a state, like near on hypothermic. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I just once I finished, I leant up against an ambulance and was just blankly staring.
Just praying for drugs.
To space, just people that were there. Yeah. And then they wrapped me up in loaded clothes, tried to warm me up. I was shaking so much that I was sort of given a cup of tea, but I was just splashing it all over my face. All right. My dad lifted my legs up to put them on a chair so he could sort of like massage them to try and get some warmth back in them, and my legs just immediately cramped all the way down the sides. Yeah. So I've got some good memories of after that race, actually, trying to get warm again.
That event that you went through, being pretty much hypothermic, how did you sort of, or what were the lessons learnt for the next time you did a obstacle course race that had similar conditions? How do you sort of approach, what you're going to wear in an event that potentially you can get hypothermia?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, because the actual events, they're designed to you beyond out of your comfort zone. So that way you experience new things that you wouldn't experience in everyday life. So you get cold and you get cut up and you get scratched. So that means if you're going to go and do another event like that, you could say, for example, wear a wetsuit or wear a dry suit where you're going to pretty much be kind of comfortable throughout the entire event. But that actually takes away from the experience and really sort of removes the whole idea of actually doing the event. So it's a fine line between wearing enough that you're not putting yourself in danger, but not wearing too much that you actually get the experience of the event. So I went and did another challenge called the Nuts Challenge, which is held in March. So still quite cold actually in the UK because the water hasn't really warmed up, even though we're moving into spring. By then, the water temperature hasn't sort of started to rise yet. Yeah. And that was 4 laps of a 7-kilometre course, which involves a lot of obstacles and a lot of water. And I actually decided for that to wear a neoprene rash vest like you would for, say, surfing, which is a sort of like 1 mil thick. And then still went with the same pair of shorts and trail running trainers.
With wetsuits for OCR, are they just like your generic surfing sort of wetsuit, or are they nowadays getting more, specifically designed for wearing during OCR events?
I think the way it's going is if you want a wetsuit which is going to sort of be a bit more rugged and actually make it through the event, a surfing wetsuit would probably be a better bet. But there's a new sport coming out of Sweden called swim run, where you swim between islands and run over the islands pretty much, or just swim, run and whatnot. Yeah. So the wetsuits that are being designed for that sport are designed to be able to, they normally have a front zip and they've got flexible panels in certain places, so they're better to run in, and they've got pockets for gels and whatnot. So those wetsuits actually lend themselves towards obstacle racing a lot better.
Now, just on, you mentioned gels, and I know with trail ultras, for example, you have, checkpoints or aid stations every X number of kilometres, for example. With obstacle course racing, how can you take on board fuel like, food and or, water, for example? Is there like a checkpoint or an aid station somewhere, like located somewhere on a particular course?
There are usually aid stations, but then these events, every single event is completely different. Like the obstacles you could be doing can be completely different. The distances, everything is completely different. So some events may have aid stations. Some say you may have to carry everything you need with you. I did the World's Toughest Mudder was a 24-hour obstacle race. I did that last November. And it was a 5 mile course, and we had to do it as many times as possible in the 24 hours. So we actually got to come back into the pit and feed there before we went out on another lap. So it can vary from say that to having aid stations to having absolutely nothing at all. Just
with that, the World's Toughest Mudder, you did that in it was a team format, was that right?
Yeah, it was. I did it in 2015, and it was a team of 4 of us. And then last year they changed the rules so you could have a team of 2. Yep. So I went back with a very experienced racer, Ryan Atkins, and we did that as a team of 2 last year.
With the team format, I'm guessing you have to work as a team to try and get over certain obstacles and through certain obstacles. Is that?
Yeah, many of them you have to, but then also it's like that anyway, even for the single races. So then you have to rely on your competitors to help you through as well. So it's really kind of like a team thing that everyone is helping each other through the race, even though you are racing. Yeah. It's kind of a very special format. I mean, there's not many sports where you see people helping their competitors.
There's so many different, I don't know whether you call them organisations or just sort of different events and different promoters, if you like. Are the rules similar from like Spartan Race to Tough Mudder to, all the different ones? Are the rules radically different, or are they sort of fairly similar across the board?
They're completely different. I mean, nothing is standardised whatsoever, which is one great thing about the sport, but then also something I guess is kind of detracting from it and kind of limiting how far the sport can grow as well. Because, I mean, say, for example, in a Spartan race, if you can't complete an obstacle, you have to do 30 burpees as your forfeit. All right. But then, say, in the Obstacle Racing World Championships, you get a wristband, and if you can't complete one of the obstacles, they cut the wristband, and that means you're uneligible for prize money.
Oh, really?
So you have to. And then I compete in the toughest race series in Scandinavia and across Europe. And for them, they have a penalty system. So they have, say, a running penalty or a carrying penalty where you have to carry, say, a sandbag. So if you can't do the obstacle, you have to take that penalty instead, which is going to tire you out and add on extra time to complete it. So it really is different from every race.
You know, with these events, do they have a particular obstacle that's like the star attraction of the event? One that makes sort of people who enter this particular event just sort of shaking their boots type thing?
Very often, some events do. I mean, especially at World's Toughest Mudder, I'd have to say it's probably the cliff jump.
Yep.
So it's, I think it's about 10 meters, just over 10 meters high jump off a cliff into a lake, and then you swim across and get out the other side. So if you can imagine doing that 15 to 20 times during the 24 hours, it does sort of like take its toll running an ultra race, but then having to jump from a 10-meter platform and smash into the water.
Yeah, 10 meters is full on. I've done, I've been off the 5-meter diving board at the pool, but 10 would be pretty full on.
Yeah, so that was, but yeah, there's often sort of like big obstacles like that in some races, which are sort of like the star attraction that people will go there to do, because not all of these races are big challenges where it's really hard to do them. I think that's actually a misconception with obstacle course racing. People always think it's about the toughest thing and you're going to get hypothermia and you're going to get cut up and there'll be barbed wire and things. But a lot of these events, actually, they're very completable and they're just a lot of fun to do, no matter what fitness level you have. So that way, a lot of the obstacles that people are actually looking forward to are actually the more fun ones. Like in some of the toughest races, they build the biggest slide you could ever possibly imagine, with a big lip at the bottom as well. So you get thrown sort of 4 or 5 meters into the air before hitting into the lake. And I mean, that obstacle, it's scary, I guess, because of the height, but it's actually more of a fun obstacle than anything else.
What about your core? Do you sort of specifically train your core in terms of doing heaps of sit-ups?
Yeah, I think the majority of my strength training is aimed towards being a quicker runner. So I do strength training, which any runner I can imagine doing, which would include a lot of core work anyway, to be honest, and also going climbing, that works your core as well. So,
do you have a particular favourite obstacle?
That's actually quite a tough question. I've done so many races trying to think back on them all. I can remember one really, really great obstacle, which was the ML race, where you climbed up 2 or 3 containers and then grabbed onto the biggest rope swing you could ever possibly imagine, and then swung across about sort of like 15 meters worth of water and then tried to let go so you could land on the other side without getting wet. That was a really fun obstacle. I remember that one quite well.
If someone was wanting to get into obstacle course racing, and you had like a blank canvas, other than running, what do you think would be the next best sort of base coming into, to come into an obstacle course race? Do you think someone who's like maybe a gymnast, do you think they'd excel, or is there a particular sport that sort of really comes to your mind that would potentially be a really good basis for moving into OCR racing?
I would have thought if you removed all the runners in the world, it would have to be another cardio-based sport, so they can transfer into the running side relatively easily. Say, for example, cross-country skiing, who are already relatively strong in the upper body because of the poling, but then we've also got a massive, massive cardio base, so they can transfer into the running quite easily. Because the majority of it is running. I mean, there are some technical obstacles which require a lot of grip strength, but the majority of the time spent is running. So it is just about that cardio side of things.
Has there ever been a time where, you've been on you're deep into a particular race and, you're redlining, your muscles have pretty much popped. You might be doing some sort of monkey bar type thing and you're almost at the edge of sort of falling off. How do you sort of get through that, not giving up the time penalty or some other penalty? How do you sort of manage to find that extra thing within you to not take that penalty?
I think I've always tried to remind myself that the body can do a lot more than the mind's telling it can. So I'm always just thinking, okay, like my muscles might be tired, but really my mind is telling them they're more tired than they actually are. So no matter what happens, I should be able to continue going. I should be able to complete whatever I'm doing. There's also been times, say in Spartan races, where you have to carry things, and what I'm carrying is so heavy that I literally have to pick it up, walk, and count to say 5 or 10, and then put it down again and rest, and then pick it up. So just break down the challenge into lots of small chunks, so they're more manageable. Because otherwise, if you thought about the entire carry you'd have to do, you'd probably just sort of like lay down and cry.
Just on the penalties, like let's just say that like a monkey bar type thing, if you're halfway through it and then you just can't continue and you drop, is that an automatic penalty? Does the penalty automatically kick in, or can you just go back to the start of that particular obstacle and try it again?
So again, it would differ from the different types of races. So in Spartan racing, you only get one try at all the obstacles. Yeah. So you would literally, if you just jumped up and grabbed onto one bar and then slipped off, they'd make you do the 30 burpees, which I think maybe it's fine for the top runners, which sort of all should be able to do the obstacles anyway. But if it's just coming down to the average people that just want to go and challenge themselves and try and do that obstacle, it's a bit of a shame because it means they can't have another go. And you pay this money to do an event, it'd be nice to have a couple of goes at the obstacle so you actually manage to do it and get the satisfaction of being able to do it. Yeah. But then in other race series like Toughest, if you take the monkey bars, you can try and do them as many times as possible, as long as you move over to the sort of like furthest right-hand side usually, to let other people that are coming in for the first time get like straight access to the obstacle so they don't have to queue up behind you who've had a couple of goes. Yeah. But then also something that's great about the Toughest races is as well as, say, the monkey bars, they've got an obstacle called the flying monkey where you have to swing and jump between the bars, which are about 1.7 meters apart. All right. So that's the fast lane. So if you can do that one, you can just run straight off. But if you take the monkey bars, you have to do, say, a crawl afterwards, which kind of slows you down. It's kind of like a bit of a penalty for just doing the easier obstacle. Yeah. But those flying monkey, you can only try them once. You just get one go. So it's kind of a big decision as to whether you take the fast lane or the easier lane and risk it.
With a lot of these events, you sort of do multiple laps on the course. With the elite guys, you guys will be starting, at the front and then off you go. And then, the main sort of competitors, are behind you. As the race progresses, is it ever a risk where you're sort of held up by just your weekend warrior type people?
Some events can be like that. I have to say most of the ones I've done in the last years have been really well managed, so that's not so much of a problem. Yeah. If it is a lapped event like that, most people which are there just to have fun and just to complete the course understand that there are other people on the course which are racing and trying to win prize money and whatnot. So they understand that, and they would let you go to the front of the queue if there was a queue as well, as long as you're polite about it and ask nicely. Usually they're so stoked they'll just sort of let you go to the front anyway. So I've never really had too much of a problem with that sort of thing.
You're fairly young still, aren't you?
I'm 27.
Yeah. How, like, in terms of your physical peak, in terms of your strength and your endurance and your speed, you're still a number of years off from even reaching your peak. When do you think you'll reach your peak in terms of your physical prowess?
I'm not sure. With sort of sprinting, I guess I'm maybe past my peak now, but with the endurance side of things, you can go up to your 35, 40 and not get much slower and just be able to go further. So I've got no idea really. I know there's a whole host of obstacle races there, so I'd like to think I've got many years ahead of me, especially because it's skill based as well, and skills just get better as you get older. You just learn more and get more experience.
And what's been the toughest one you've done? Was it like the world's toughest mudder, the 24-hour one? G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love, and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more kick-ass episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. And what's been the toughest one you've done? Was it like the world's toughest mudder, the 24-hour one?
Maybe. I mean, it's a really interesting question, because I've also done races like, well, it's not an obstacle race, but Red Bull 400, where you start at the bottom of a ski slope and you have to, the ski jump, and you just have to run to the top.
Yeah, I've seen that on Facebook. It looked pretty good.
So that lasts 5 minutes, but as a tough challenge to try and do it as quickly as possible, it's really horrible. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got this 24-hour race, which is just a really big, long grind, which is tough in another instance. So really deciding between the two, I'm not really sure.
With the world's toughest mudder, did you specifically train for sleep deprivation at all?
Not really, actually. I don't think I did a mountain marathon in the UK a couple of years ago, and I really found in that event that I didn't sleep one wink during the night in between the 2 days of running.
All right.
And the next day I got up and I ran just fine. Yeah. So from then on, I found, well, whether you sleep or not, your body can still do what you ask it to do. So from then on, I kind of really thought, well, sleep isn't really that important during the actual event, and I knew that jumping off a 10-meter cliff 20 times would probably wake me up anyway. So,
What was the name of that race you did up the ski slope?
Red Bull 400.
How long does that take to run up it?
I think it's, say, 5 or 6 minutes, but I think the actual ski jumps can vary in heights. Yeah. But we've got a similar race here in Bergen, which is called Stolzerkleiven, which is a stone staircase which climbs 300 meters over 900 meters. Right. And that takes between, well, 8 minutes and up, really. I mean, my best time is 8 minutes 29, which is still over 30 seconds off the record. Yeah. But that is, say, disgustingly redlining for 8 minutes. It's horrible. It's one of the worst feelings in the world, really.
Yeah, I could imagine your quads would just, a minute into it or 2 minutes into it, from there on, your quads would just be screaming.
Yeah, and it's very sort of varying as well, because the stone staircase, it isn't just sort of like standard stairs which run up a mountain. They're sort of like cut back and forward, and they're all different heights, and they're really uneven. But then nearing the top, you get onto some wooden stairs which are all really even, and then you get back onto the stony stuff. So you live in Bergen in Norway. What are the trails and the mountains like sort of near where you live? So Bergen itself is actually surrounded by some mountains which are all about between 500 and 600 meters. Yeah. And Bergen is at sea level, so they're not massive mountains, but they're within a kilometre of the city centre, and there's amazing paths all over them. Okay. Because people come from the city and they go straight up into the mountains, there's some absolutely amazing running and some amazing trails. Yeah. And we've got every type of trail you could imagine as well, from sort of like tarmac to gravel paths to stone staircases to paths which have just evolved over time to scrambling up rocky faces. It's really a trail running dream here.
Now, speaking of trail running, last year, 2016, you won the Sky Racing Extreme World Series. Like, coming from Australia, the Sky Running World Series, the Sky Running International Sky Running Federation, it seems to be like a European-based organisation. Tell us about the extreme category you're in, because I know there's the vertical kilometre, there's the ultra, and I think there's might be another one. But yeah, you won.
Yeah, the classic one.
The classic. What's the extreme one that you won last year?
So I think it started with Tromsø Sky Race, where it was a race that took a lot of time to complete because it climbed a lot of meters and was very technical running. Like you're up on a very technical ridge and there's some scrambling where you have to climb with your hands and your feet. So they couldn't really put it in the ultra category because it was 55 kilometers, but it wasn't a true ultra, like really long race. But it still took a lot of time to complete because of the technicality of it. So they decided to create a new category called the Extreme Series, which is where the races are somewhere between 50 and 60 kilometers, but they're just very exposed with a lot of climbing and truly extreme, running up and down mountains in their purest form.
And when you say running up and down mountains, this is sort of cliff, you're running up and down real steep, sort of rocky and, slippery cliffs. Is that right?
Yeah, practically. It can be, I think the most I've done is grade 3 or grade 2 scrambling or something like that, which is sort of like very easy rock climbing, but obviously there's no protection. So it adds a degree of danger there, but they're still very used routes and there's still safety people on hand and it's still a very controlled environment. So it's probably one of the most controlled environments for that sort of extreme challenge on such a natural thing.
Do you think your, all the experience you'd gained or you have in the OCR world, especially the physicality side of things, with upper body strength, do you think a lot of that experience and training that you underwent translated well into the sky running events?
I think so. Definitely when they are in the more extreme races, when we are scrambling, especially on one of the ridges in the Glencoe Skyline race, it was very upper body strength orientated. It was sort of like, I think it was 3 to 5 kilometers of up and down scrambling where it wasn't just running. And I think having an obstacle racing background and going bouldering must have helped me a lot. And that's where I managed to take the lead and then go on to win the race as well. So I think definitely.
Yeah. So which one was that, the Glencoe in Scotland?
Yeah, that was Glencoe, which is the last race of the Extreme Series last year. Yep. And that was the race that I managed to win, and it had bonus points attached to it as well, which earned me the title of the entire series.
I think I heard you mention before, is that sort of the feather in your cap, currently?
Yeah,
is that sort of
I think so. I mean, when it comes to my racing career, having won one of the World Series from Sky Racing, I think that's what I'm most proud of to date. Obviously, not taking anything away from the obstacle racing, it's just it's a more established sport with probably a higher level of competition. And I truly had to sort of like find something special deep within me in order to win that. So I am very, very proud of that.
So that going back, I'm just having a look on your website. What year was it? The Tromsø Sky Race in 2015, which you won. This is in Norway. That was a star-studded field, that particular event, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was pretty surprised to learn who I'd beaten after the event, to be honest.
So tell. Did you know who this person was? Do you want to maybe give us some insight into who the person you're talking about was?
Yeah, I think it was Alberto who had won the Transvolcania that year and has also been the sort of Skyrunning Ultra World Series winner and whatnot. I don't know exactly what he's won, but it's a lot. One of the only people I think to have beaten Kilian Jornet at a number of races. So I was pretty surprised to learn that I'd beaten him, and with quite a margin after the race too. So
you had no idea that you were going, like, I think he was the current world champion, wasn't he? Yeah,
I think so, yeah. And Tromsø that year was one of the ultra races as well. So he was the current world champion in the type of race that race was.
Yeah. So, and you had no idea that you were of his sort of background?
Not so much. I knew there'd be very good people racing, but not quite of that caliber. And when I went past him, I definitely wasn't thinking about that either. I was just trying to look as strong as possible and concentrate on my own race.
How do you approach one of those sky running events? If there's a lot of vertical, some of those have like 4.5 kilometres worth of vertical gain. How do you approach that particular race? Do you sort of go out hard, or do you go out sort of conservatively and sort of try and leave some money in the bank towards the end, or how do you sort of approach something with a lot of climbing in it?
I think trying to limit your effort at the beginning is absolutely key. So sometimes I'd use a heart rate monitor and make sure that I don't go out of zone 4 and into zone 5, because as soon as you're going into zone 5 heart rate, you're burning matches. So have an alarm maybe set on your watch. So if your heart rate does climb too high, maybe in your training in the months before, decide sort of what sort of level of heart rate you can maintain for what amount of time. But then also, I guess the main thing as well is nutrition and knowing what you need to put in your body, and also just having an open mindedness, knowing that your body can cope with it. It's just going to take a lot of time, so just sort of keep plodding away at it, keep cutting out the kilometres and keep getting them done, and at some point you'll get to the finish line. With
your nutrition, do you have a particular approach to nutrition leading up to a particular event, either a sky running event or an OCR event, or
with normal nutrition before a sky running event, especially, I just make sure I'm never hungry in the week before. So I make sure I'm just eating a lot of big nutritious meals and not sort of letting my body deplete itself at all. Yeah. Which I think is very important, just so you're a sort of absolutely max capacity to sort of put your body through hell.
Yeah. And on the actual day, do you just sort of go like a gel food strategy, or what do you sort of have during the run or during the event?
Up to about 6 hours, I can survive just on gels. These races normally tip just over that, between 6 and 7 hours. So I'd normally take quite a few gels with me and a little bit of solid food as well. Yeah. I'm sponsored by Cliff Bar, so that really works well on these longer events. You can use the shop blocks on the. You can take the gels as well, and then also the bars are an amazing source of energy for these longer events.
Is the like trail running or the sky running something that you're going to continue with moving forward?
Yeah, my 2017 season is again split directly in half, so I've got a number of sky races and a number of obstacle races as well, so it's about 50-50 for this year as well.
And if you sort of cast your gaze beyond this year, you know, like if you sort of project 5 years into the future, can you see yourself still having a 50-50 split between sort of trail ultras and OCR, or mainly OCR, or getting into something completely different like bouldering or you know, solo climbing at all?
Yeah, I've got no idea. I've not really thought that far ahead. Yeah. I do know that as I get older, I'll probably end up doing longer and longer distances. I mean, in the back of my mind, to do something like the UTMB would be absolutely amazing, but then I try not to think too far ahead and take each year as it comes and sort of have fun with it as well. So whatever I'm having fun with, as long as I can make a little bit of money through it, I'm sure I'll be happy doing it.
You can make a full-time living, I believe, on in the OCR world.
Yeah, the last 2 years for me has gone well enough that I've supported myself. Yep. I have actually just got a part-time job now, but that is mainly so I can learn some more Norwegian, because I have to interact with people day in, day out in a sort of work type environment, and also just to put a little more structure into my day. So I have to wake up and I have to do something. That means I have to train then, and everything's sort of more structured, which just keeps me more motivated and more just more productive, really.
And how is your Norwegian going? Are you sort of conversational?
I think it's getting there. I can sort of have simple conversations quite adequately. There's a lot of dialects in Norwegian as well, so it's different from different parts of the country. Yeah. But I think I'm getting there slowly.
I remember it would have been maybe 2001. Like I did like a week-long holiday in Norway, and one of the markets, I remember, they had, you know, they were selling sort of all seafood and stuff like that, and they had whale meat, which kind of blew my mind, you know, seeing that.
Yeah,
that was
I think they only just started up with that recently, actually, because it was never allowed up until sort of like not too long ago. So
yeah,
I guess I don't know. I guess they've decided that they've replenished their numbers enough, and that a small amount of hunting is okay. I can't imagine many people buy it, so I can't imagine that there's that great a demand for it anyway.
Yeah. Do you ever take on board, just with nutrition, a really high-fat diet as opposed to, high carb? Do you sort of ever take that approach, like a high-fat, low-carb nutrition plan leading up to an event?
Not really. I think generally my diet is probably quite high fat and high carb, and relatively I try and the only thing I do concentrate on is not having too much sugar. Yep. So like I don't have any like soda or sweet drinks like that. I don't even drink orange juice because of the amount of sugar in it sort of thing. I'd rather just eat an orange. Yep. So I just more think about that side of things and then just try and have a balanced diet.
Yep. And what motivates you to get up in the morning and train?
I think normally I really love to run, and also just what type of weather it is dictates what type of training I'm going to do, and then that just means that I'm looking forward to doing that sort of training. Yeah. So if I wake up and it's a blue sky day and snow everywhere, I'll go out skiing. I'm going to really look forward to that. If I wake up and it's raining, I'll go out for a run because I really don't mind running in the rain. Yeah, just really taking it day by day just makes it interesting.
Now, as a multiple-time world champion, how important is goal setting to you? Or can you maybe give listeners an insight into, how you sort of set goals and the importance of that?
I've never actually been much of a goal setter. I've never really had my VO2 max taken. I've never sort of like thought about where I want to be, because then part of me thinks if I set a goal, I'm going to limit myself to that goal, so I won't be able to push any further maybe. So I love to train hard and I love to push myself. I don't think I want to put the extra pressure on myself to have really high goals, and I don't want to have easy goals that I can reach and then not push any further. So just trying to enjoy my training and still have fun with it is probably the only goal I have.
Now, off air, you were talking about shortly you're going to have your VO2 max test shortly. Tell us about that. What's involved?
I've got no idea, to be honest. I've never had one taken. So from what I know, it's where you run on a treadmill and someone measures how much oxygen your body can uptake or something, and also your lactic acid levels, so how much lactic acid you're producing or clearing during the activity. Yeah. So I guess I'm going to learn a lot more about it in a couple of hours' time, but I'm looking forward to seeing that and learning a little bit more behind the science behind why I can run good.
So I think you do sort of some of the stuff to failure.
Yeah, I'm trying not to think about that right now. It's, during the winter, I do a lot of long, slow activities. I don't really push myself that hard, kind of like saving myself psychologically for before the race season starts, when I can really go hard intervals and whatnot. So the thought of running until I can't run anymore right now probably isn't actually that nice.
Is there a particular event that you've done that really sticks out in your mind where you've failed?
I think I talked briefly about the Nuts Challenge, which was about a year after my first obstacle race, and it was sort of like my second really cold obstacle race where I wore the neoprene top. Yeah. I managed to do 3.5 laps of the 4, which was about 4 to 4.5 hours before being so cold that I was going to sleep on the course. So I'd be running along and then sort of see a nice patch of leaves. So I'd just sort of like crouch down and close my eyes up again and sort of like trying to run off again, being so cold that I couldn't even talk or think clearly, until at one point I just went up to a marshal and asked whether I could have a nap at his feet under a foil blanket. Oh, right. So he said, yeah, fine. And he was really nice about it. And while I was under the foil blanket, he was very conversational, trying to keep me awake. And then all of a sudden a Land Rover turned up. They carted me into the back of it and took me to a warming tent and warmed me up. Yeah. So I actually DNF'd that race. I didn't even finish, just because I got so cold.
I remember seeing some footage of you and some other guy. It might have been a few years old, but this other guy had full-on hypothermia, and I'm pretty sure it was you, dragged him into a shower and turned on like the hot water to try and get his core starting to heat up again.
Yeah, the funny thing was that wasn't even that hot water. It's just he was so cold. The steam was insane. But you have to be quite careful actually when you're that cold that you don't jump straight into a really hot shower because you really can't tell how hot the water is. And if you warm yourself up too quickly, I think that can have detrimental effects. But yeah, that was James Appleton at the end of Tough Guy. So that was the same event that was my first event. I went back 2 years ago to do it and to try and race it and to try and win it. And I actually did win it. And when I went through and got access to some nice showers, and all of a sudden James came in, who I think had come third, and he couldn't talk, he couldn't walk, he couldn't do anything. So he came into the shower, and I sort of like tried to strip the neoprene off of him and strip him down to his boxers, sort of thing, just so he could start warming up. And I don't think he'd even did warm up for about an hour afterwards. It was kind of scary, to be honest.
Now, Dry Robe, I think you're sponsored by Dry Robe.
Yeah.
Like I've only become aware of them like in the last year, but they look like an essential piece of kit.
Yeah, in a lot of these races, you finish and you're very cold and you're wet, and you want to be able to put something on, take your wet clothes off, and put dry clothes on again as quickly as possible. Foil blankets really don't do that much, especially if you've got wet clothes underneath them. In fact, I think they do nothing. So you really want to be able to put this thing on and then get changed underneath it. And the Dry Robe actually keeps you warm as well, and it keeps you protected from the wind and the elements. So they really are perfect. They're just a little bit bulky to travel with.
So they're actually windproof as well.
Yeah, they've got a windproof, waterproof outer, and then the inside is like a fleece lining, which is not just normal fleece. It's like it's meant to keep you warm even when it's wet and absorb a little bit of water. They really are amazing.
Just on success, how do you define success?
I think success is probably, well, I guess, making a living from what you're doing, but also enjoying it and doing it for the right reasons. I don't think you can really be that successful in something unless you actually really enjoy doing it.
And on advice, if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Jonathan Albon and give him some advice, what would you tell him?
Well, apart from buy some gold? I guess actually not much, just sort of like take it day by day and just follow, just go with the flow, which is what I've done, and I've ended up here. So don't try and force things too much, because if you try and force things, you won't end up where you're meant to be. Now, coming up, you're currently training for, is it the Tough Guy again? Yeah, it's actually Tough Guy in a week and a half now.
Yeah.
So that'd be my third time doing it, and I've not really thought about that experience either. So I've got the VO2 Max to look forward to today, and Tough Guy in a week and a half. It's going to be quite a couple of weeks. Yeah.
And how's your training going for that? Are you sort of in the phase where you're going to start to ramp, to ease off your training?
I guess so. I've had a couple of hard weeks, and this week will be kind of hard as well, and then next week I'll sort of take a little bit easier.
Yep.
I'm going to go out tomorrow and test some clothing options. So there's a small lake a couple of kilometres away up in the mountains. I'm going to run up there and sort of have a little swim and test out some different clothing options, and hopefully I come up with a good system that will help keep me a little bit warm during the event, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that. Thank
you very much.
10 or so days. Good luck with the rest of this year, 2017. You got a pretty stacked calendar of events coming up. Whereabouts can people find you online and, follow your progress and maybe reach out and say hi and stuff like that?
I guess the first place would be my website, which is jonathanalbon.com. And then from there, you can jump onto my athlete page on Facebook or my Instagram.
Yeah.
I especially like Instagram. It's a really nice place that I can take photos when I'm up in the mountains and sort of try and let people experience what I see and what I do for themselves. Yeah. And then if anyone's interested in what training I do, I log everything on Strava as well. So you can find me on Strava and see where I've been and what I've done and at what speeds.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for coming on to the podcast, and good luck with 2017. And thanks again for coming on.
No worries. Thank you. It's been fun.
Okay, cheers.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence. and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.